pants, where the section on the pair of pants is. Very linear. She takes you to where you need to go, and that's where you find the pair of pants. In a lot of cultures. So American culture is very linear. Okay? That's what we would call it, a linear culture. You ask for what it is that you want. May I have a glass of water? Very linear. Okay? That's American culture.
So is that like straight to the point?
Straight to the point. Exactly. So if I was to depict linear culture, it would look like this. Okay? Linear communication. Somebody asks for something, it's straight to the point, they get what it is that they want. Here's how an African person might ask for a glass of water. Good morning. Oh, I had such a long night last night. You know, I just feel like my body is just requiring so much liquid, you know? And my mother told me this story once about a guy who didn't have enough water. And before you knew it, he was dehydrated and then he needed to go to the hospital. This person is asking you for a glass of water.
Procrastination and manipulation.
Right, wait, hold on a second on those words that you use. Just say them again for me, Mr. Nate.
Procrastination and manipulation.
Okay, so how it is that the reason it is that they're asking you this way is because they don't want to offend you. Okay, so they know for a fact that you may not have access to water. It might be putting you out to ask you for a glass of water. And they are hoping, by all these hints that you're being given,
Right.
that you're going to be like,
Instead of getting straight to the point.
do you need water? Okay? Because in our culture in Africa, you can't ask for something. You need to have it offered to you before you accept it. Okay? Does that make sense? So circular communication looks like this. Okay? Right? And there's the glass of water. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So have you ever been with somebody okay, can I just get an indication of who the linear communicators are in the room? Very straight to the point. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, is there anybody who's circular in the room? Yes! Okay, so circular communication, the reason why this is different, linear communicators prefer very short communication, okay? They feel it's better. Circular communicators do not want to offend anybody by what it is that they need, okay? So the people who come from these kinds of cultures are generally very humble people who are generally not good at self-advocacy. They're generally very gentle. Yes, Mr.
Well,
Nate.
the circular here in our culture is like you being manipulative.
Okay.
You know, you're like trying to be sneaky or something like that. You know, like the story you told.
Yeah.
You know, you going on and on and on and on, and we standing there. You know, like we like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We know what you want, but we waiting for you to get straight to the point.
So that's you know this is what I'm trying to build up.
When you say circular, you could also be a little shy too.
You could be shy. So what I'm trying to do in this particular environment is build you up as intercultural learning specialists and communication specialists, so that when you see this behavior come to the forefront, you're then able to address it and say, oh, okay, I understand what you're doing. Would you like some water? Yeah? Because that's taking the best of the two cultures and merging them. Yeah? So I agree with you, there are some very manipulative people. But just listen out for whether this is circular behavior or whether it's manipulation. Okay? Yes,
We
Ms.
get
Wanda?
that the passengers do that all the time.
The what?
The passengers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but they don't want to pay. But it's yes.
Yes.
They are going all around the world.
That's okay.
They just got to right phone. How you feel?
What they're trying to do is try and convey a message, yeah. But in this particular circumstance, it's not being very skillfully conveyed. Okay.
And the last word out their mouth is, I ain't got it. So just come straight to the point and just say it.
So maybe you want to ask
They
them.
come in jail papers. Just sit down. They come on
And you
jail
know what
papers,
it
hospital
offend
papers.
you because you didn't ask. You know you already came
Hold on,
with a
everyone. One at a
manipulation.
time.
You already came with a manipulation.
Exactly.
And so it makes you upset rather than you just getting on and say, look, I'm short this time, you know, this and that, and this. Then you also with being a bus operator, you know the body language before you already know who won't pay and who's not gonna pay to
Right.
get on a bus.
Okay.
It's just the instinct.
I hear you, Zach.
So is that different because they would be generally what you're talking about is Philadelphians who are doing this to you most of the time. They're Philadelphians who ride the bus regularly,
Not
No,
necessarily.
not necessarily.
Not just from Philadelphia.
or I should say people that are generally a part of the culture here, not necessarily a tourist. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yes, we get tourists.
No, I understand that you do, but the gamers, the scammers that say, sis, I just got out of the hospital, bro, can you help me out? I mean, are we talking about people that are from, maybe Italy or another country, or Americans? Okay. So what I was trying to understand is there a difference between when Americans are doing this versus some who they understand the norms of our culture and they're breaking them, versus someone else who comes from a different culture?
No, not necessarily, because I mean, not to be, but you do get.
I'm just asking.
You do get Koreans that come in.
Okay.
They do that, like they don't understand that you got to put money in their fare box. So I go in your store and you want that nickel.
Okay. Okay, hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. So the reason that we try and do this is to try and dissipate that conflict, right? So the objective, the mission of my organization is to try and stop intercultural conflict and break down stereotypes, okay? So what I'm trying to do in this particular session is just make you aware that not everybody communicates the same way that you do,
Right.
okay? So in Africa, for example, we know that sort of only 20% of what's spoken word is actually communication. People are engaged with you on so many levels. They're looking at your face. They're looking at what your hands are doing. They're looking at your body language, yeah? So I'm just making you aware of the fact that there is so much communication out there and there's so much that we're missing, okay? So I'm just trying to get you to understand that there's so much going on that if we even tried to remember just one of these communication styles, it's going to improve the way we communicate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm trying to give you skills so that you can communicate better. Yeah? Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the second one. And ask you sort of what you believe these to mean. Collective versus individualism.
Together.
How we all think.
Together,
How we all think.
how we think. Okay. Anybody else? I'll take one more answer before I.
Single-minded.
Single-minded. Okay.
Individualism.
Okay. So these are both communication styles, and I'm going to give you a difference between American communication and it's not right, it's not wrong, it's different. Okay? I'm going to give you an example of collective, and then I'm going to give you an example of individualism. So a country that's sort of very individual is Germany. And what individualism stands for is the ability to advocate and talk from self. So, I feel ... I am ... This is what I'm thinking. Yeah? This is how I contribute to a group. Collective is the idea that all of us are because the next person is. Okay? And these are environments such as Thailand, such as Korea, such as Africa. Most of Africa is very, very collective. And the catchphrase there is we. I think we should Let us go and do What about if we XXX? Does that make sense? So you can pick up instantaneously from your colleagues and from the people that work with you, whether they are more of a collective culture or whether they are more of a singular or individualist culture. Okay? And some of the differences between those two, neither of them are right or wrong. Again, as I said before. But people who live in an individual culture are people who are very determined to get things that are material, that are determined to be successful, that are determined to get to the top of corporate ladders, yeah? That are determined to get education. Make sense? People in collective cultures, in terms of their communication styles especially, I am because you are. So it's quite okay to sacrifice who you are for the well-being of the group.
It's like the birds and the feathers flock together.
Yeah.
Like that.
You said Germany was individual,
Yes.
but could that have something to do with Nazi in the 30s, how they were so collective under Hitler? And now with it became communist when it was split with East and West after World War II.
That's a great
And
question.
now it's more so instead of the group, it's
That's a
about the
great
individual,
question.
because the individual was lost.
I think that's an amazing point. I actually haven't studied how the culture has been influenced by the world wars or communism, but I definitely see that and how that plays a role. Yeah. So I'll look into that and I'll get back to you if you give me collective. I'll give you my email address and we'll correspond so I can find out for you. So in the collective, we're saying a lot of things like we can and can we and we must and we should. There's a lot of emphasis on we.
So it's not talking individualism, it's talking collectively.
Exactly.
And, group-wise.
Exactly. How do we feel about a particular subject? So, for example, in South Africa, a lot of the time, a colleague would never ever say to another colleague, I think that your work sucks. In South Africa, it's, I think we really need to devise a strategy on how we can include everybody. The we is very important, okay?
Right.
So if you're interested in finding out how this impacts communication, you can imagine how frustrating it is when you're saying to a colleague, how do you feel about the fact that we've got a new director? Oh, I really think we should strategize and we should look at ways of how to support each other. Do you understand the differences? Yeah? In the I, individual sort of culture, you would find people very direct, very open, very honest. I think that the new director is actually quite terrible, and I think we should use this strategy and that strategy to get around it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the I am is very, very, very strong. So here's a good one for Michelle, because you brought up the Koreans. You have people who are sometimes task communicators, and then you have people who are relationship communicators. How many of you in the room know somebody who will stop on the way to work and have a conversation with the neighbor? Like, just stop in the middle of, like, you see the neighbor, you're like, oh, there's the neighbor. You wait, you make eye contact with that person. You have to ask them about the dog. You have to ask them about how their marriage is doing, how are their children, is everything okay? Yeah, can I just get a show of hands if you know somebody like that?
I got a neighbor that's like that.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. And how many people in this room are task people? Task people are people who are like, I really want to speak to you, but I can't right now because I'm on my way to work and I need to go. Show me, yeah?
That's me.
Okay. Do you understand how there could be conflict between these two types of people?
Sure.
One person is trying to develop a relationship. I really want to get to know you so that in one day when I need your help, I'll be able to call on you. Right? The task person is saying, I still want to be your friend. But can we do this at 5 o'clock? Right? Can you see how conflicting that would be? If relationship is in who you are, and somebody is telling you, I'll speak to you after 5, that's going to make you feel like, I'm not more important than your job. Yeah? And the task person is saying, do you want to give me money? You'll be more important if you give me money. You pay my bills, you'll be just as important as my job. Okay. Okay. So you get, for example, task-orientated people saying things like, let's get it done. What do we need to do from here? How can we take this project forward? Very focused on task, okay? Your relationship people are going to say things like,
let's wait and see what everybody else says.
exactly. How do they feel? Okay? Let's wait. Let's see how the rest of the group feels. Is this making sense? Okay, so can you imagine how these two people must have conflict? Who is in a relationship right now or knows somebody in a relationship right now who's having conflict around one person being task-orientated and one person being relationship-orientated? Yeah. Okay. So take this information back. Yeah. And if you know that the other person is in relationship or in a relationship communication style, try and meet them at that level. You'll see it'll change the whole dynamic of the relationship. Make sense? Okay. This is my favorite one to explain to all my American friends because I come from a culture that is incredibly formal. And you all live in a culture that is very informal. So what do I mean by that? Formal and informal is the ability for the people of that culture to talk to one another by using miss or ma'am or sir or mister. Okay, that would be a very formal culture. You don't assume that people around you are friends of yours. you have rank, dependent on age, dependent on how old certain people are, how much wisdom they hold for the culture, okay? And then in informal cultures, everybody is at the same level, and we automatically assume respect for every person, yeah? And the same way that you would speak to somebody would be, you'd speak to a child the same way as you'd speak to a grown-up, yeah? So that for me was one of the biggest things for me coming to America, is being able to tell the difference, because automatically I just want to go to this default where I'm saying ma'am, Mr., Miss. I remember meeting Miss Charlotte for the first time. I was like, Miss Charlotte, Miss Charlotte. She was like, my name is Charlotte, my name is Charlotte. So I had to get used to the differences between my culture and not my culture. How many people have access, direct access to their supervisor in this room? Yeah, you all do? Everybody? Okay. So in Thailand, I'll just tell this quick story. In Thailand, because they have such a formal culture, they have a director, and I went to a conference in Thailand once, and as the director entered, the whole staff from Thailand had to stand, and then they had to bow as he walked past, right? I was so taken aback because I thought South Africa was a formal culture, but when I saw the director of Thailand walk in and everybody take a bow, I was like, whoa, this is someone serious. I thought it was the president, to be honest with you. I was like, okay, they organized the big guns to come and meet us at the conference, only to find out that it was the director. So in formal cultures, you'll notice things like supervisors will have their own offices. The doors will be closed. You will have no direct access to a supervisor, okay? And the reason for that is because of their rank. Okay. Whereas in an informal culture, the supervisor will sit on the same floor as the employees. Okay. Children and adults are sort of treated the same way. In a formal culture, children have a separate space. So, for example, one of the stories that I tell is, as a child, one of the biggest, most awesome things about becoming a grown-up was that I could move from the children's seat, which was on the floor, to the table, which is where the adults sat. Yeah. So again, it's not wrong or right, it's different. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? So I'll just draw a tie here. My drawing skills are terrible. The people at AFS always laugh at me. Oh, you see, that just looks terrible. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, now I don't know what that is. That looks like a cannoli though. Okay, and formal is sort of, I don't know what I was trying there. Okay. Now we come to sort of also a really good one, which is indirect and direct. How's everybody doing, by the way? Is everybody okay? Is my pace okay? Yeah? Okay, excellent. You guys will stop me, right?
You weren't kidding about the 45 minutes on talk, were you?
No. I'm quite good with it. You'll see why on my next slide. Okay. Direct versus indirect. This is exactly the same or very similar to linear and circular communication. So in a direct country, someone will say to you, I don't think you dressed appropriately to go to the mall. Okay? In a country where indirect speech is sort of more common, a mother would say to her daughter, are you going to the mall like that? Okay? Eye contact plays a role. Intonation in my voice plays a role. What my body is doing plays a role. So where do you think America is? Direct or indirect?
Indirect.
They direct? Okay, that's good. That's good to know. You can actually be both. You guys, as America, when the index was done, where you take a stand and you decide where you are, you're actually able to see that most Americans lie on the border. So sometimes they do some of the indirect stuff, sometimes they do the very direct stuff. Okay, also influenced by your own culture. Okay, I'm not going to draw these out. Okay, that's super direct. So this is one that's actually quite interesting. It's the difference between high context and low context. So I'll explain the two themes for you. High context communicators are people who have a lot of hidden meaning to what it is that they're saying. So for example, a culture with high context is a lot of the Latina cultures, so you would understand this very well, Ed. You'll back me up in a little while when I tell a story. Low context people are people who need to be told and fed the information so that they can understand it. So a very easy way to tell when you all travel, and I'm holding a space for you that you're all going to travel. Yes, I'm bringing that into the circle. You will all travel. Go when you see a newspaper of a country, you'll be able to work out whether they're low context people or high context people. Low context countries will have a lot of words, small headlines, okay? Limited pictures. High context countries will have huge headlines, okay? And there'll be a huge picture of whatever the subject matter is. So for example, when you go into sort of a lot of South American countries, you'll see a heading that says, he's done it. If you're not from the country, you're going to be like, who is he? And what has he done? Okay? If you're not from there, you're confused. Why? Because it's high context. The people from the country know who he is, what he's done, exactly, and why he's done what it is that he's done. Okay? In a low context community, you've got a heading, same story, right? That says, champion or Olympic champion has now taken home the 15th medal and made his home country Mexico proud. Yeah? That lets Americans know, okay, we see what he's done, why he's done it, okay, and why people are celebrating him. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So now can you imagine the high context and low context conflict that could arise? Yeah? So for example, I'll tell the story. I'll just give you an example of each. A high context country. I was privileged enough to stay in Thailand, and in Thailand I learned a lot about something called Green Chai. And Green Chai is the ability not to finish the last thing on the plate, because that is a sign that you don't need it. It goes to whoever else needs it around the table and the circle. Beautiful, right? Beautiful culture. So the one day we walk into a hostess's house. I'm staying with some volunteers. We walk into a hostess's house, and this is the conversation that goes on. Tell me what you understand by this, right? So we sit at the table, and in Thailand, all the tables are always laid out with your best, your finest crockery, your finest cutlery at all given moments in time. It's on the table, okay? So we sit down very prim and proper at this Thai lady's table, and the volunteer that's with me says, you have such beautiful crockery. Such beautiful crockery. Okay? And the hostess says, oh, if you think my crockery is good, you need to see my pots. She goes to the kitchen and she fetches a pot. And the lady who's sitting at the table with me just says, oh, thank you, they are beautiful. And she keeps honoring and keeps giving sort of admiration to the pot. I'm sitting there, I'm low context as heck. I'm like, did these two women just spend 15 minutes talking about cutlery and crockery and pots? So this is what is actually happening. We walk out of the house, my volunteer that's with me says, did you understand it? Did you get that? I said, no, I have no idea what you guys were talking about. She says, when you sit down at a person's table in Thailand and you comment on the crockery, that means I'm hungry. So then she'll go to the kitchen, she'll get a pot to show you I haven't cooked. That's why she turns it around, she gives you the pot, she says, I haven't cooked right now, there's no food in the house. Right? Okay, you can imagine that, right? That drove me insane. I was like, can I get some water? I'm hungry, give me some food, give me some water.
It's time to go.
Okay. So I just want to find out how many people are high context and how many people are low context. And the reason you know this, I often say, is a good scale to figure out who you are, is when you know that the way that your mother looks at you, she has a look that indicates something. My mother has a look. So I know I'm high context. I'm high context, but I've got some very low context values, but I'm high context. My mother has that look that lets me know that I'm doing something wrong. Right. So how many of us are high context in this room? How many of us come from high context cultures? Yeah? Where one phrase can mean a million things. Like, You know what that means. You don't need to explain that. How many of us in the room are low context? How many people need to hear it in order to understand it? Anybody here? No? Sometimes. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, there's sort of some, I'm bringing my session to a close now. But there's sort of some of these ideas, so I wanted to know, did you want to line up and do it on the floor, which is another activity that I can do with you? to get a scale of where everybody is, so that both Miss Charlotte and Miss Sack know what kind of communication style you appreciate? Or would you prefer to just have me hang these up and you can come and write your name under some of these 6 concepts so that we understand how to communicate with each other?
We'll write a name.
You'll write your name? Okay, so there's some, I'm gonna lay these concepts out. There's some markers, and what I want you to do is just look at each of these, all 6 of those themes, and just put your name down somewhere, so that everybody in this room knows how to handle you in terms of your communication
You
style.
can sign more than one though, right?
You can sign more than one, or you can put if you feel like you in the middle, you can put your name somewhere here, so that people know exactly where you are. Yeah. What I find is that a lot of people who are interested in different cultures or have traveled are generally speaking deviants of these topics. So they'll, for example, be sometimes circular communicators, but they're very low context. They'll tell a story about something, but it'll take a long time to get the story out. Does that make sense? Did this work? Was this helpful for you?
Yes.
Yes. Do we understand why the Koreans are so choppy, Michelle? Because they task. They're trying to get this work done. Yeah. And we are more relationship orientated. Yeah. Is there any other conflicts that we wanted to
Can I ask you a
mention?
question about,
Yes.
like, you hear, like, you said African, right?
Yeah.
Now, is it true that, the men are superior and the women aren't? Like, if it's something happens, the women aren't supposed to talk, the man is supposed to do a talk, he's supposed to sit down and don't say nothing? Is that?
Okay, so it depends on which African country you speak of. That's the first thing. But what's important to know in African culture in general is that we have very clearly defined gender roles for the majority of our countries, of our continent. So what that means is sometimes that the man will probably speak on behalf of his family, because a lot of men are considered the chieftain of their own homes. So very regularly, yes, that is quite common. However, what is also quite common in those particular cultures is that the women have their own places in which to succeed and in which ways that they will excel that men will never understand. So again, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's different, but it does sometimes, if you come from a neo sort of modern family like my family has been, sometimes that can be very frustrating to have one of my uncles come over and I still have to sit next to him on the floor and not be able to stand in his presence. So
Only by it asked because my daughter had a car accident and she hit the guy. He cut her off. Needless to say, it was an accident. So of course my daughter was like 19 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So the gentleman, he was going off on her, and the wife sat in the car and she said absolutely nothing, which made sense because he screamed at the top of his lungs at my daughter. And then I pull up and listen, I'm giving him the business. And then my friend pulls up. So when the man comes, he wants to he wants to go back and forth, and the wife couldn't say nothing. Instead of her stepping in to calm down, listen, let me handle it, let me talk. But I mean, it's just he looked at her you better not say nothing. So she just went and got back in the car.
So it depends. So for example, men in Africa generally, chronologically, were known as having the people who would have education. And that would mean that they would more betterly or more easily be able to handle conflict than women. Okay? So there's a lot in our history that influences our culture. And I think that might be one of the things in this particular circumstance that played a role. Maybe she isn't educated enough to have a conversation in English. That's possible. That's so we must always, whenever I deal with intercultural specialists, I always tell them, assume the best of the next person's culture, because you don't know what they've had to be, what they've gone through. I'll take these 2 questions. Yes, Ms. Kiki?
Okay. I had an issue with one of the guys on the line.
Yeah.
He was my leader on the line. He's a younger guy. He's an African.
Yes.
And he was skipping stops. Now, we're on 21. So, if you're late, that's one thing. But he's just riding down the street, not picking up anybody.
Right.
So I get to the end of the line and I said, listen, I come up to him and I tell him, I said, listen, I said, if you're late, you can skip a couple stops, but to just charter there's nobody standing out there, you don't do that.
Yeah.
So he acted like I wasn't even talking to him. So then when he comes up beside me, I said, okay,